move forward with Be a Lady, which it was I believe it's like an ad.
Yeah, so this is it's a it's a powerful video or an ad. I wish I had more context on like who produced it, and what it was a powerful piece written by Camille.
It's by the
Rainville.
It's by the magazine Girls.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's a magazine. That is published for.
So it's written by Camille Rainville, of the writings of a Furious Woman, and it was Girls is I believe the magazine that it was written for. Yeah. So Cynthia Nixon is the narrator of this ad,
directed by Paul McLean, and it was published by Girls.
Mm-hmm. So we know Cynthia Nixon from Sex and the City. What's her character's name in Sex and the City?
Miranda, I believe.
Miranda. So we know her from there. So it's bringing a very recognizable face to this ad. Only amplifies the messaging, right?
Yeah.
And the messaging in this ad was powerful. I listened to it like 3 or 4 times, right? Just to, try and fully like grasp and understand it, right? And so true, right? Yeah. In terms of like the things that young women are being told at such a young age. I mean, 10, 11, 12 years old, they're being told like, girls wear dresses, girls wear pink, don't wear that, that's too short, that's too long, that's too tight, that's too loose, that's too revealing, that's not revealing enough. Boys want to see you look, sexy, right? Blondes have more fun, brunettes are taken more seriously, like redheads are weird, don't go red, like all these different things that young women are told throughout their adolescence, and like they have to grow up with these things, these like body image issues, these just these image issues in general, and this ad highlights all of them and kind of just calling out the bullshit.
It calls out the very sort of double standard, hypocritical nature that women have to deal with going through life, and there were a couple things in this particular piece that she says, but it's not only what she says, but what the images are that are paired with what she says. They did a very sort of fantastic job in sort of lining all those things up and showing you sort of the contradiction.
The visuals here
at the same time
were just striking. As powerful as the words. Yeah.
They were striking and they were direct.
There's one thing that stood out to me. I want to let you finish.
No, go ahead.
So the first time I watched it, I was just listening. First time I watched it, I was listening, but I was like really paying attention to the visuals, right? Just because it's so glaring, and the visuals here are so powerful. Second time I watched it, I was listening to like the words, right? Like what is she actually saying, right? Sure. And I was trying to listen to the message. Third time I watched it is when you typically start to like dissect it, right? Like what do the visuals mean? What do the words mean? Do they all align? And that's when I started to notice. And I noticed this when I went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C. I believe this was like 2017 or something like that.
Yeah.
And just looking at the women's movement, from a 30,000, feet in the air view, one of the things that stood out here is like the lack of diversity. And even in an ad like this, which is meant to empower, right? The third or fourth time I watched it, I just started to try and count. And I believe there are only like 7 or 8 women of color in this entire ad, which may feature like 30 to 40 like white women, right? Mm-hmm. And in the snapshots that feature women, the white women, it's like these powerful, bold images, right, or imagery or video, right? And in the scenes that feature the African American women, it's more about like speaking towards like the powerlessness of like certain situations, like whether it's makeup or like being overweight or something like that, and like it's just I may be looking too granularly at it, but one of the things I notice is like here's another instance in which like all right, these white women are being shown to be powerful and smart and educated and strong, and these black women, there are a few women of color in here, but like, white women are powerful and strong. I don't think that was the intention of this ad, and I'm not trying to like detract from it, but it's one of the things you just have to notice is like there's not much diversity in this ad.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that's very true. Now that you say that, my mind honestly didn't go there the first, because I watched it yesterday and I watched it about 2 or 3 times. One of the things that actually did jump out at me was the part where they show like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and they have a few images like that I specifically remember from the piece. But I know that is an issue whenever, and here's the thing is whenever you're talking about whenever you're talking about anybody's plight, right? Like any other sort of any group that historically has been oppressed or has been underrepresented or essentially told, hey, we want you to be this, we want you to be that, but also all those things contradict each other, and it's a bunch of bullshit. You have to be careful, or it's an interesting thing to watch people how they navigate that, of being careful of telling it only through a particular lens. So for instance, when we're talking about things that have happened to the Black community, we're generally only talking about the Black community, right? But when you're talking about women, well, are you talking about white women or are you talking about all women, right? Yeah. But it matters what the lens is that we see that through, right? Like, so for instance, who and I don't know much about Paul, I believe his name is Paul McLean, who directed this piece, but it was written by Camille Rainville, like you said before. I haven't pulled up Paul's picture, but I can almost tell you for sure Paul's definitely white.
Yeah.
And so it matters, and I'm sure he had other people assisting him and helping him,
I mentioned there was a team of like very like diverse and intelligent, powerful women here behind this. And again, I do believe the intent, right, is about like women's rights and women's voices and women's like equal rights for women, all of these things that are very important and really do matter, right? I think the execution here, one of the things for me that just stood out was like, imagery is powerful, the messaging is powerful. In order for, and this is a man saying, what the women's movement needs to do, right? So take it with a grain of salt. But like, diversity needs to be fully embraced, right? If it's going to be about women's rights and women's progression, it needs to be about all women.
Well, I
don't know if that is.
Well, that's what I'm that's what I'm trying to say. It's like it's different from talking about like specific groups of communities, right? So if you're talking about the Latino community, if you're talking about the Asian community, if you're talking about I don't know, the if you're talking about like maybe like the disabled community, right? Like, but that's a wide swath of people from different races, from different religions, from different backgrounds, right? But if you're talking about like the Black community, or like if you're even talking about like religion, like you're talking about the Jewish community, or you're talking about the Muslim community, Christian community, Catholic community, like whatever, right?
Yeah,
you have to like understand that those things aren't like specific. So if you're telling a story and you're claiming to represent those people, right? Well, you have to tell the story of those people, right?
in their entirety. Yeah.
In their entirety, and so again, this ad, while powerful, it is powerful. That when you bring that up, I'm like, like that is a good criticism of
and when you look at it from another lens, a political lens, right? It's like, and you look back at the 2016 elections, right? I think it was almost 50% of like white women in America voted for Trump, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of those women will also, are probably identify themselves as like feminists or part of the feminist movement, right, or women's rights movement. And it's like,
maybe I don't know if that's necessarily true.
I mean, I would like to imagine. I would hope, right? Like you'd hope that all women are like, hey, we're about forward progression of women, right? So, but I don't have any numbers. But Fair enough. Do know that almost half of women in the United States, according to the polls, right, the voting statistics, voted for Trump.
Sure.
Right? So it's like, if you did vote for Trump, you do identify yourself as like a feminist or a part of the women's rights movement, those two things don't directly align, and you may be a part of the women's rights movements, but you voted for someone who's not, women's rights is not at the forefront of his mission, right? And certainly not the rights of people of color. So it's like, you isolate yourself in a box where it's like, it looks like you're really only about white women's rights.
Well, I mean, that very well might be true, but that from their perspective, okay. But
that divides the movement, right? So it's like,
maybe it depends on what movement that that you're trying to drive forward. I think
the women's movements, the women's rights movement, then is divided, right? If it's like white women are like, oh, we care about white women,
well, just like
any color, like, well, we care about all rights.
Just like any other movement, though, it's not a monolith, right? Like it's not as if you could say, okay, you're for the women's rights movements, but all women who would consider themselves to be feminists believe the same things. There's so many different spectrum. Sure. There's such a large spectrum of the different types of feminists that there are, and I'm not going to try to sit here and act like I'm a scholar and list to you exactly all the different,
I don't want that heat
I know of, right? But just like any other group, or any other again, people who feel like they've been basically dealt a bad hand from society. It's when you're dealing with certain things, like if you're speaking for that group, you have to be careful with, hey, let me actually like represent that group in its full context and not just a certain swath of that group. So I think that's the major thing that but aside from that, the actual words that were spoken were really powerful, and I think really impactful, and I think we're going to talk about a story later that I think might kind of deal with some things, there's some aspects of this that I kind of find funny, but like in terms of like just the weird like double standard or the weird way people view certain things. But all in all, I think this is a very powerful video, delivers a very powerful message, but they can clean it up a little bit, I think, when it comes to what you pointed out, which is sort of the diverse voices that feel a little underrepresented in this in this piece.
So moving forward, we're going to take a huge